This week, we learned that President Trump has entrusted the construction of his proposed border wall to his son-in-law and senior advisor, Jared Kushner. Current and former administration officials tell the Washington Post Kushner effectively has become the wall's project manager. The move, obviously not without controversy, as Kushner reportedly has butted heads with officials in acquiring land and constructing at a pace that the president wants. According to the Post, it is, quote, paramount to Trump that at least 400 miles be built by Election Day. The Trump administration has finished 83 miles of barriers so far, according to the latest CBP figures, but nearly all of that is classified as replacement wall. It's not new wall. The White House declined to comment on the report, and the paper notes Kushner's defenders in the administration say he is bringing a private sector approach to the project. That brings us to Steve Ratner's chart. Steve, it's not just the Washington Post reporting, it's also the Commissioner of Customs Border Protection, who said from the podium at the White House, 83 miles of wall, all of it just renovation of existing wall. There has been no new wall. There is no new wall.
Not quite, but let me come to that quickly. Yes,
that's what he said.
No, there is a new wall, but let us build ourselves to that. So let's just start with.
Go ahead.
Let's just start with the fact that there's 1,954 miles of border between us and Mexico. Trump has pledged to create his kind of wall on 1,000 miles of that. 654 miles of fencing of one sort or another exists now. That would be replaced as part of his 1,000 miles. And as you said earlier, 83 miles of replacement wall has actually been built so far. But there has been some new wall started. There are 8 miles of new wall that has been started. Would anyone like to hazard a guess on how much of the 8 miles of new wall that has been started has actually been finished? Susan Del Percio. What?
How about none?
Close. 32 feet. They have actually completed 32 feet of new wall. So let's take a look at what Trump is up against, or what Jared Kushner, actually more accurately, is up against. So as you heard, they want to have 450 feet plus or minus of wall completed by the next election day. 285 of that would be simply replacement wall. So more replacement wall, not really adding any new wall. 60 feet of it is what's called duplicate fencing, where you put a second wall in front of an existing wall to make it more secure. So what does it come down to? It comes down to 165 feet of new wall is all they're trying to really build out of the 1,000 feet Trump promised between now and Election Day. Even that will be really tough. It will require them to quadruple the pace of construction that they're at now. It will require them to get 800 permits to cross private land in Texas to put this wall up. There are very few people who think it is going to happen.
Steve, I have to read you a quote from 2 weeks ago at the White House as Peter Alexander got in this exchange with the acting commissioner of CBP. Finally got Mr. Morgan to say, right now, 78 miles have been built where there was an existing form of barrier. So he was saying there's 78 miles of wall. Finally, Peter Alexander got him to admit it's where there was already existing wall.
Right.
You're suggesting there is new wall?
Well, 8 miles started.
Okay.
32 feet completed.
Okay, all right. So we're talking about a 32-foot difference in our argument. Go ahead.
That's going to be a really boring video to watch, I think, Steve, because according to some reports, Jared Kushner wants to put cameras on the wall to do like web streaming of the construction.
To monitor, yes.
So Jared Kushner, what people should feel so warm and fuzzy about, Jared Kushner has been successful at everything he's done. The Mideast is in better shape than ever. He is a stallion of competency. You know, the wall is the ultimate symbol of Donald Trump, is this ongoing thing, this complete fabrication, this complete lie, this absurdity that, if it wasn't so sad it'd be laughable, is the ultimate symbol of his presidency, a complete head fake.
Well, let me show you one other thing, if we have one more second. What's ironic about all this, in fact, is that there was this surge. Everybody remembers the surge of the immigrants from the so-called Northern Triangle, Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. And that peaked back up in here. But it has actually dropped down to historically lower levels that it existed at before. So the reason you haven't been reading about the surge lately is because there hasn't been a surge. And interestingly, whether you like it or not, it really is a result of Trump policies, that he basically threatened Mexico with tariffs unless they move the army in to secure the border. He got the Northern Triangle countries to agree to limit their immigration. And so, in fact, the wall may now be a solution in search of a problem.
Donnie, I think you're right. This is a promise that was made from the minute he came down the escalator. It was a chant at a rally. They're still chanting it last night at his rally in Florida, and he's going out there and claiming that something is happening that's not happening, as Steve Chart's show right there. Coming up on Morning Joe, Mayor and 2020 candidate Pete Buttigieg has had trouble attracting African-American voters. Freshly examined comments he made about minorities and education are sparking some new backlash. The Reverend Al Sharpton and Professor Michael Eric Dyson join us for that discussion. Morning Joe will be right back.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.